This video is about the history of Samson. The riddle that impacted Samson's life so greatly was, out of the eater came forth meat, and out of the strong came forth sweetness. Before Israel had kings, they had judges, which are viewed as people who had military authority over the Israelites. Although the judges had military authority, the actual leader of Israel was God. This is made clear in 1 Samuel chapter 8, when the people demanded of Samuel, who was the last of the judges of Israel, that they have a regular human king like the rest of the nations. 1 Samuel chapter 8, verses 4 through 7 says, "Then all the elders of Israel gathered themselves together, and came to Samuel unto Ramah, and said unto him, Behold, thou art old, and thy sons walk not in thy ways. Now make us a king to judge us like all the nations. But the thing displeased Samuel, when they said, Give us a king to judge us. And Samuel prayed unto the Lord. And the Lord said unto Samuel, Hearken unto the voice of the people in all that they say unto thee. For they have not rejected thee, but they have rejected me, that I should not reign over them." The times of the judges took place before the times of the kings of Israel, and perhaps one of the most famous judges in the Bible was a man named Samson. When the Spirit of the Lord came upon him, he became quite possibly the physically strongest man in the world. He was a man who, although lived a very colorful life, had strong faith in the God of Israel. Samson completed many feats of strength throughout his life, yet made many mistakes throughout his life as well. However, his ultimate physical downfall may have been caused simply because he did not learn from the mistakes that he made in the past, and continued in a way that he already knew was bad. And I would like to point out that although many people may picture Samson as a really muscular man, he probably was not muscular in a way that made him stand out. Therefore, the depictions of Samson used in this video are probably not accurate to how Samson actually looked like in reality. If he was very muscular, then people might think that the strength came from him. But if he was skinny or normally built, then when people saw the accomplishment of Samson completed with the strength that he had, then they would know that the strength did not come from Samson, thus giving glory to the Lord God of Samson, who was the one that gave Samson supernatural strength. And we also know that Samson had 7 locks of hair on his head. So overall, physically, Samson was probably a skinny or normally built man who had long hair on his head, braided into 7 locks, and had a long beard as well. However, with that brief snapshot of Samson's life, and a small look into how Samson may have looked like, let's take a more in-depth view on the biblical judge, Samson. Samson's conception. Samson's father's name was Manoah, and he was from the tribe of Dan. Similar to other biblical figures like Isaac, Joseph, and Samuel, Samson's parents had a hard time having a child. Samson's mother was barren. However, the angel of the Lord appeared unto her and told her that she would conceive and bear a son. She was commanded not to eat anything unclean, and not to drink any wine or strong drink. The reason is because the child that she would have would be a Nazirite to God from the womb, who will deliver Israel out of the hand of the Philistines. A Nazirite was someone who was separated unto the service of God, and they took vows. Some things a Nazirite was not allowed to do would be to drink wine, strong drink, or even eat grapes. They were not allowed to let a razor touch their head, meaning they were not supposed to cut their hair, and they were not allowed to touch a dead body. It is interesting to note that in Samson's life, he might have broken all of these. However, more on that later. When Samson's mother heard what the angel of the Lord had told her, she went and told Manoah the things that the angel of the Lord said unto her. Then Manoah asked the Lord to send the angel of the Lord again unto them, to teach them what they should do to the child that will be born. The Lord heard Manoah, and the angel of the Lord came again unto Samson's mom while she was sitting in the field by herself, while her husband was somewhere else. So Samson's mom ran and got Manoah, who came back with her and saw the angel of the Lord. Manoah then basically asked the angel of the Lord how they should train the child up. The angel of the Lord said, of all that he told Samson's mother, let her beware. And he also said for Samson's mother not to eat anything that comes from the vine, drink wine or strong drink, or eat anything unclean. After this, Manoah asks the angel of the Lord to wait for him so that he can make a kid ready for him. By the way, a kid is a young goat. The angel of the Lord said that he would wait for Manoah to prepare the kid. However, he would not eat of Manoah's bread, and that if Manoah was to make a burnt offering, it must be unto the Lord. After this, a pretty interesting thing happens. Manoah asks the angel of the Lord what his name was, so that when the sayings of the angel of the Lord came to pass, they could do the angel of the Lord honor. However, to this the angel of the Lord asked Manoah why he sought after his name, seeing that his name was secret. And an interesting thought that some people have is that this may have actually been an Old Testament appearance of Jesus Christ. And as angel in the original language could mean messenger, and in the original language the word secret could mean wonderful or incomprehensible, this may have been actually an Old Testament appearance of Christ. Remember that in the Old Testament, people did not know the name of the Christ. However, we know now that the name of the Christ is Jesus. And another reason why people think this may have been an Old Testament appearance of Christ is because when Manoah offered a kid with a meat offering, the flame went toward heaven, and then the angel of the Lord ascended in the flame. Manoah and his wife looked at what had happened and fell on their faces to the ground. Then Manoah said unto his wife that they will die because they have seen God. However, Manoah's wife assured Manoah that if the Lord wanted to kill them, he would not have let them experience everything they just went through. And after this, Samson's mother gave birth to Samson, and Samson grew, and the Lord blessed him. Samson's wife. So Samson went down to Timnath, and saw a woman who was of the daughters of the Philistines. And he told his father and mother that he had seen a daughter of the Philistines, and he wanted them to get her for him to be his wife. However, his parents asked Samson if he could find a wife from his brethren or his people, instead of a woman who was not part of the Lord's people. To this, Samson insisted that they give him the Philistine woman from Timnath to wife, because she pleased him well. And I would like to make note that the Bible points out that this situation was of the Lord, because he sought an occasion against the Philistines. So Samson with his father and mother went to Timnath and came to the vineyards of Timnath. A question that I would like you to think about is, if Samson was not supposed to drink wine or eat grapes, what was he doing in a vineyard? And while there, it appears that Samson got separated from his parents, during which a young lion roared against him. And the Spirit of the Lord came very mightily upon Samson, and with his bare hands Samson rent the lion as if he would a kid. Again, a kid is a young goat. And I would like to note again that the strength did not come from Samson, but the strength came from the Lord who came upon Samson. However, when Samson did this to the lion, he did not tell his parents what had happened. And Samson went and talked to the woman from Timnath, and she pleased him very much. And after some time, he came back to take her. However, he went to go see the carcass of the lion. Inside of the carcass of the lion, he found a swarm of bees and honey inside of the carcass. So he took from the honey of the carcass, and he ate from it, and he also went to his parents and gave them to eat some as well. However, he did not tell them that he had taken the honey out of the carcass of a lion. And right now, I would like to bring back to your memory that Samson was a Nazirite separated to the service of the Lord, who would deliver the children of Israel out of the hand of the Philistines. And as a Nazirite, Samson was not allowed to drink wine, strong drink, or even eat grapes. They were not allowed to let a razor touch their head, meaning they were not supposed to cut their hair, and he was not allowed to touch a dead body. So in touching the carcass and eating honey from it, he had broken one of the vows that he was supposed to keep as a Nazirite. But the Spirit of the Lord was still with Samson, which is really demonstrating the grace of God and how loving and merciful he is. And in not telling his parents about where he had gotten the honey from, Samson quite possibly avoided a scolding from his parents because they knew he was not supposed to touch a dead body. And after this, Samson's father went to the woman that Samson wanted to marry, and Samson made there a feast. Now the wedding feast that Samson was having for the wedding usually involves drinking, so it is assumed that Samson probably broke another one of the Nazirite vows and drank wine or strong drink when he was not supposed to. Or it is assumed that Samson could have broken this Nazirite vow while in the vineyard where he saw the lion, but we really don't know for sure if he broke the vow where he was not supposed to drink wine, strong drink, or even eat grapes. And when they saw him, they brought Samson 30 companions to be with him. Then Samson made a deal with the 30 men. He said that he would give them a riddle, and if they can figure it out and tell him the answer within the 7 days of the feast, then he will give them 30 sheets and 30 change of garments. But if they could not tell him within the 7 days of the feast, then they would give him 30 sheets and 30 changes of garments instead. The men agreed to his challenge and asked Samson to tell them the riddle. Judges chapter 14, verse 14 says, "And he said unto them, Out of the eater came forth meat, and out of the strong came forth sweetness. And they could not in 3 days expound the riddle. And the men went to Samson's wife, and they threatened her, saying that if she does not entice Samson to tell her the answer to the riddle and then tell them what the answer is, then they will burn her and her father's house with fire." So Samson's wife cried to Samson and accused him of hating her, because he gave the men this challenge about the riddle, but didn't even tell her what the answer was. So Samson said that if he didn't even tell his father or mother what the answer was, why should he tell her? And for the 7 days of the feast, as long as the feast lasted, Samson's wife cried before Samson, suggesting that she had been trying to figure out the answer to the riddle since day one, but this threat to her life just motivated her more to find out what the answer was. And on the 7th day, because she laid sore upon him, meaning that she was so constant in her bothering of him about the answer, he told her. And when she found out the answer, she went and told the men what the answer was. So then on the 7th day, before the sun went down, the men told Samson, "What is sweeter than honey, and what is stronger than a lion?" Samson said unto them, "If ye had not plowed with my heifer, ye had not found out my riddle." Essentially, Samson knew that the only reason that they knew the answer was because his wife had told them. And the Spirit of the Lord came upon Samson, and he went down to Ashkelon, and killed 30 men, took their spoil, and gave change of garments to the men who told him the answer to the riddle. But Samson was angry, and he went to his father's house, and Samson's wife was given to one of the men at the feast. But after a while, during the time of the wheat harvest, Samson visited his wife with a young goat, with the intention of consummating his marriage with her, but her dad would not let him go in unto her. Her father explained to Samson that he thought Samson did not want her anymore, so he gave her to Samson's companion. But she has a younger sister, and is she not prettier than her? So Samson's father-in-law asked Samson to take his younger daughter instead. But Samson said, "What he is about to do to the Philistines, he will be more blameless than the Philistines, even though he is going to do something bad to them." So Samson caught 300 foxes and tied pairs of 2 foxes by their tails, putting a firebrand in between their tails. And he let the foxes go into the cornfields of the Philistines, and burned down the shocks, standing corn, the vineyards, and olives. So the Philistines said, "Who did this?" And they answered, "Samson, the son-in-law of the Timnites, because he had given his wife to his companion." So the Philistines went and burned Samson's wife and her father with fire. And I would like to point out that it may have been better for Samson's wife to tell Samson that the 30 men at the feast threatened to kill her and her father's house with fire, because the spirits of the Lord may have come upon Samson, and he might have been able to defend his wife and her family. However, when she trusted in her own strength, instead of the strength that comes from the spirits of the Lord, she and her father still ended up getting burned with fire. And a question I would like to ask you is your trust in your own strength to get you through the difficulties of life? Or is your trust in the strength of the Spirit of the Lord, who will give you his strength to help you through the difficulties of life? And I don't just mean that he will give you physical strength, but also the spiritual strength to do what you ought to do and to resist the things that you should not do. In response to the Philistines burning his wife and his father-in-law with fire, Samson said, after he is avenged of them doing this, then he will stop bothering them. So Samson killed the Philistines with a great slaughter and dwelt in the top of the rock Etam. Samson versus the Philistines. So the Philistines set up base at Judah, and the men of Judah asked them, "Why are you coming against us?" And they said, "To bind Samson and to do to him as he has done to us." So 300 men of Judah went to the top of the rock Etam and asked him if he did not realize that the Philistines were rulers over them, and why did Samson put the men of Judah in such a situation? And Samson said that what the Philistines did to him, he did to the Philistines. And the men of Judah told Samson that they came to bind Samson and to give him over to the Philistines. So Samson made them tell him that they would not kill him themselves and fight against him. So they agreed and bound him and brought him to the Philistines. And the Philistines shouted against Samson, and the Spirit of the Lord came mightily upon Samson. And the cords upon his arms became as flax, burnt in the fire, and the bands loosed from off his hands. And he found a new jawbone of a donkey, and took it, and slew 1,000 men with it. Judges chapter 15, verse 16 says, And Samson said, With the jawbone of an ass, heaps upon heaps, with the jaw of an ass have I slain 1,000 men. And when Samson was done speaking, he threw the jawbone away from him, and was very thirsty. So he called upon the Lord, and the Lord clave a hollow place that was in the jaw, and water came out of it. And after Samson had drunk, his spirit came again, and he revived. And in the days of the Philistines he judged Israel 20 years. Samson and the Harlot. Then Samson went to Gaza and saw a harlot, and had sexual relations with her. And I would like to point out that this most likely was not Delilah, as when this harlot is introduced, she is unnamed and is in Gaza. But when introduced, Delilah is introduced by name and lives in a place called Sorek. But someone told the Gazites that Samson was in Gaza, so they compassed him and waited for him quietly in the gates of the city all night, planning to kill him when it was day. And at midnight Samson arose and took the doors of the gates of the city, and the 2 posts, bar and all, and put them upon his shoulders, and carried them to the top of a hill that is before Hebron. Samson and Delilah. Judges chapter 16 verse 4 says, And it came to pass afterward that he loved a woman in the valley of Sorek, whose name was Delilah. So from this verse we can assume that the harlot and Delilah were different people. And the lords of the Philistines came to her and asked her to entice him and find out where his strength comes from, so that they can defeat and hurt him. And they offered to pay her 1,100 pieces of silver each. Contrasting what Delilah was offered to entice Samson versus what Samson's wife was offered, we can make an assumption on some characteristics of Delilah. Samson's wife may have been a regular Philistine girl, and when 30 men wanted something from her about Samson, they threatened to kill her and her father's house unless she did what they wanted. However, with Delilah, that was not the case. Firstly, her father or any other personal male authority figure to whom she submitted to is not mentioned. Along with this, when the lords of the Philistines wanted something from her about Samson, they did not threaten her with death or physical violence. These people were not just ordinary men either. They were some of the highest officials ruling over the Philistines, and they offered her an enormous amount of money instead of just threatening to do violence to her. Something to think about is, could Delilah have been a well-respected woman that warranted her being offered money instead of being carelessly threatened with violence? And according to the amount of lords that the Philistines had in 1 Samuel chapter 6, Delilah could have been offered a total of 5,500 pieces of silver, which was a lot of money. And just remember that Judas betrayed Jesus for 30 pieces of silver. And I don't bring this up to show that Jesus was betrayed for less money than Samson was, but I bring it up to put into perspective just how much money Delilah was offered. It looks like Delilah may have been what the modern culture would call a real boss babe. A boss babe is a successful woman who is confident and who calls the shots in her own life and in her own career. Delilah appears to have been a strong, independent woman that didn't need a man to tell her what she could or could not do. With the 5,500 pieces of silver, she not only probably became the richest independent woman in that part of the world, she was probably richer than most of the regular men in the area that she lived in. In terms of the feminist movement, Delilah was a real pioneer, as the culture back then did not make it near as easy for an independent woman to financially succeed as modern Western culture has made it for women. As such, maybe modern independent women, part of the feminist movement, should probably call themselves Daughters of Delilah, as that is a fitting name, seeing that she was one of the first independent women on the scene in the world. And Delilah asks Samson where his great strength came from and how he might be bound to afflict him. And he told her to bind him with 7 green withs that had never been dried. Now this possibly could be a reference to a rope that was made from trees like vine branches. So the lords of the Philistines brought the 7 green withs to her to tie him up with, and she bound him with them. Also, there were men in the chamber hiding that Samson and Delilah were in, so that they could ambush Samson. So Delilah said to Samson, "The Philistines be upon thee, Samson," and he broke the withs. So Delilah complained to Samson, saying that he mocked her and lied to her. And she asked him again how he might be bound. So he told her to tie him with new ropes, and he will be weak as other men. So while there were people waiting to ambush Samson in the chamber, Samson and Delilah were in, she tied him with new ropes and said, "The Philistines be upon thee, Samson." And he broke the ropes off him. And she complained again, saying that he mocked and lied to her. And she asked him again how he could be bound, and he told her if she weaved the 7 locks of his head with the web. So she fastened it with the pin, and told Samson, "The Philistines be upon thee, Samson." And he awoke from his sleep, and went away with the pin of the beam, and with the web. Then Delilah asked Samson, how could he say that he loves her, when his heart is not with her, since he mocked her these 3 times, and did not tell her the secret of his strength? Judges chapter 16, verses 16 through 17 says, "And it came to pass, when she pressed him daily with her words, and urged him, so that his soul was vexed unto death, that he told her all his heart, and said unto her, There hath not come a razor upon mine head, for I have been a Nazarite unto God from my mother's womb. If I be shaven, then my strength will go from me, and I shall become weak, and be like any other man." So when Delilah saw that he had told her all his heart, she sent and called for the lords of the Philistines, saying, "Come," because Samson had shown her all his heart. So the lords of the Philistines came up unto her with money in hand. And Delilah made Samson sleep on her knees, and called for a man, and caused him to shave off the 7 locks from Samson's head. So now remember that another Nazirite vow had been broken. And Delilah began to afflict Samson, and Samson's strength went from him. And she told Samson, "The Philistines be upon thee, Samson." And Samson awoke from his sleep, and said that he will go out as at other times before, and shake himself. But he didn't realize that the Spirit of the Lord had departed from him. And the Philistines took him, and gouged out his eyes, brought him to Gaza, bound him in fetters of brass, and made him grind in the prison house. Samson's death. However, after he was shaven, the hair of his head began to grow again. Then the lords of the Philistines gathered together for a great sacrifice before their false god Dagon, and to rejoice, because they said that their God had delivered Samson into their hand. So, when their hearts were full of joy, they called for Samson to entertain them. So they called for him out of the prison, and he entertained them, and they set him up between two pillars. Then Samson asked a young man, who held him by the hand, to let him feel the pillars that the house stood upon, so that he can lean on it. And the house was full of men and women, and all the lords of the Philistines were there. And on the roof there were about 3,000 men and women, that watched Samson as he entertained them. And Samson called unto the Lord God, and asked him to remember him, and to strengthen him only this once, so that he can at once be avenged of the Philistines for his 2 eyes. And Samson took hold of the 2 pillars by which the house stood, and Samson said, Let me die with the Philistines. And he bowed himself with all his might, and the house fell upon the lords, and on all the people that were therein, so that the dead which he killed at his death were more than them which he slew in his entire life. Then his brethren and all the house of his father came down and took him, and buried him in the burying place of Manoah his father. And Samson judged Israel for 20 years. Although this may seem a sad ending to Samson's life, due to the actions he took in his life that caused him to end up blinded and a slave, this was probably one of the best ways he could have died. It appears that after everything he had done, when he called upon the Lord before he died, the Lord answered him. In the Bible, there is a section commonly referred to by people as the Hall of Faith, which is Hebrews chapter 11. Among those like Noah, Abraham, Jacob, Moses, and David, Samson is mentioned as an example of someone who had exemplary faith in the Lord God. The questions that I would like to leave with you is, if your life meets its end at any given moment right now, will the report of your life say that you had great faith in the Lord? And if not, then why not strive to change that while you are still alive?